Welcome to my show and tell. Today I'll be showing you all my Walking With, Prehistoric Park and Primeval collection I've amassed over the years. I've been a fan of these shows for as long as I can remember, growing up watching them and collecting any merchandise that came out to tie in with them. Let's start with the largest of the collections, my Walking With collection. Starting with the actual shows themselves with the DVD releases, I have 3 DVD copies of Walking With Dinosaurs. The UK release, the Reader's Digest UK release, and an American release. The UK and American releases are identical and show the series in its entirety. However, the UK release has an aspect ratio of 4:3, whereas the American release has a more fitting aspect ratio of 16:9. The Reader's Digest DVD version is a shortened version of the show, so that all 6 episodes are condensed into one long movie-style video, meaning that not every scene makes it in, and only scenes that directly tell the story of the dinosaurs are kept in. I also have the DVD of Prehistoric Planet, which was a kidified version of Walking with Dinosaurs, narrated by Ben Stiller. And finally, I have Andy's Dinosaur Adventures on DVD. As far as I'm aware, I now have most of the books released for the show. These are the series companion book, the annual from 2001, the 3D Dinosaurs book, the sticker book, the photo journal, Dinosaur World, How Big is a Dinosaur, the evidence, and the facts. I also have a book called Dawn of the Dinosaurs, which represents the episode New Blood, but with weird CGI renders, and doesn't appear to be part of Walking with Dinosaurs. In terms of music, all the soundtracks for these shows I have are digital, as I've never owned the audio CDs. For video games, I've got the Walking with Dinosaurs CD-ROM game, which by some miracle still works on my computer and plays fine for what it is. I may do a video covering this game in the future. I also have the free Dinosaur World game from the BBC website, which is really quite fun to play, and also runs fine except for the sky being glitchy. I'm not sure if anyone knows how to fix this. As far as the toys and figures go, I have the complete Toyway line, minus the Ornithocheirus, including 2 Postosuchus and 2 Liananosaura, as well as 2 Allosaurus, one of which I've painted to make it look more accurate to the show's depiction. These figures are all great, as they are based off the scan models for the CGI models used for the show, hence why they're all in such rigid positions, but are accurate to what you see. Some of the paint jobs aren't perfect, but still good enough. I also have the Quick line, which produced 4 figures, the Liopleurodon, Rhamphorhynchus, young Diplodocus, and Tyrannosaurus. And what's cool about these figures is that they made some species which the Toyway line didn't, like the Rhamphorhynchus and Diplodocus. They also came with bases, for which I only have the Diplodocus one. I have a couple of the 3D Movies minifigures, which are nice but don't really fit with the rest of the collection. They look good for what they are, and aren't too intrusive, so live on my shelf with the other figures anyway. Burger King created some figures as a line, which are all skeletal forms of some of the animals from the show. These are the Ophthalmosaurus, Ornithocheirus, Coelophysis, Diplodocus, and Torosaurus, and all fit together like a 3D puzzle. Lastly, I have the soft toys and the finger puppets, in which I have 4 out of the 5 which they created to my knowledge, only missing the Ornitholestes, and I have 2 Liananosaurus soft toys and the Ophthalmosaurus. But also this Tyrannosaurus, which I think is the same one seen in the Big Al making of, where an alligator eats it. I have a number of models from other companies, which I've repainted to make them look like species from the show, which I did a video on, which I'll link below. I also put any models here which resemble the species in the show. These are the Collector Iguanodon, the Collector Coelophysis, the Collector Liopleurodon, the Collector Ornithocheirus, 2 Collector Mini-Torosaurus, the Safari Hybodus, the Safari Tapejara, the Salvat Polacanthus, and the Schleich Anhanguera, and also 2 Placerias, an unbranded rubber Diplodocus, and a lead Ornithocheirus. Other items include the official board game, which is quite fun to do but nothing amazing, and a drinking cup from the live experience, which I never saw but instead ended up with this cup. My Big Al collection is somewhat smaller, but then there were very few things released. I have the UK DVD and the only tie-in book, plus the soundtrack in digital form. And that's kind of it.
Allosaurus had never seen such bullshit before.
Walking with Beasts released a ton of cool tie-in stuff. I have the UK DVD, as well as the Reader's Digest DVD, which again omits certain scenes for a more streamlined story. The cool thing about it, however, is that it has some very nice world transitions, as it moves between time periods, since all the episodes are in one block. I also have the DVD of Andy's Prehistoric Adventures. There were 5 books released in tie-in for Walking with Beasts, and I have all of them in my collection. These are the series companion book, the annual from 2002, the 3D Beasts book, the sticker book, and the photo journal. The soundtrack, like the others I have, is digital, now with the addition of some of the unreleased tracks from Whale Killer, Next of Kin, and Mammoth Journey, which is so nice to be able to finally hear those beautiful pieces in flawless copies. Aside from the online games, the sole video game released for Walking with Beasts was Operation Salvage, which doesn't run on my computer unfortunately, but I played it on an older computer once and found it quite difficult to stay alive, though it was interesting. Walking with Beasts never released any figures sadly, though I do have a few models which match the designs of the show rather well, and were clearly inspired by it. These are the Entelodon and Hyenodon made by the company AAA, which did both small and large variants, all 4 of which I own. Another product called Totally Prehistoric Beasts was a book which included a set of figures to put together, and they were definitely inspired by Walking with Beasts. Perhaps the crowning pinnacle of my Walking With collection is the physical crawly creatures prop of the animatronic Megatherium arm, which I was lucky enough to get off eBay. It's a pretty sizable item that takes up a lot of space where I could have had other displays, but that's not an issue, it's great to have. There was also a board game release which is pretty cool, and some 3D trading cards, of which I only have the Gastornis. I still need to get the rest, as well as the Kellogg's moving models. For Chased by Dinosaurs, I have 6 separate DVDs, mainly for different variations on what is included, as some feature sea monsters, whereas some do not. The soundtrack is digital from the Spanish release, which was amazing to discover that it contained it, alongside the Sea Monsters one too. Walking with Cavemen. Do I have to do this one? Oh, I do? Oh, okay. I have 2 DVD copies of it, the UK release and a German release, for some reason. Also the companion book, which I confess I'm not sure I've even ever opened. The soundtrack is the only Walking With show not to be composed by Ben Bartlett, and oddly some of the tracks from episode 1 are just on the DVD as a special feature. I have a generous 9 DVD copies of Sea Monsters, each a different release, some American, one Spanish, from which I got the soundtrack from, and various others, except the UK, which never got a DVD release of this show for some reason. Totally makes sense to have a release in every other country, up to and including Indonesia, though not in the country in which it was made. Yeah, that makes sense. Sea Monsters had a tie-in companion book, which is probably my favourite of the 4 companion books released for Walking With, not including the complete guide for prehistoric life. Finally for Sea Monsters, I have a couple of Zivactinus figures which look like the ones from the show, the collector one and a miniature one made by Little Critters. Walking With Monsters never had much in the way of physical media, only the DVD which I have the UK release of, and the Reader's Digest edition, which is actually the one I prefer to watch. Rather than reduce the content like the Dinosaurs and Beasts versions of these DVDs do, the Monsters one connects all 3 episodes together without removing anything, but in fact adding a couple of shots here and there, which is cool. I'd recommend this copy. Walking With Monsters didn't have a tie-in book per se, but there was a book released which encompassed all of Walking With, called The Complete Guide to Prehistoric Life. This book contains animals seen throughout the series, whilst also giving some of them updated names, which don't match the names of their counterparts in the show, which is odd. I guess they were trying to make it more accurate somehow? This series has never had a soundtrack release, but since the new releases of the Dinosaur and Beast soundtracks came out recently, we can remain hopeful.
We can all dream.
Moving on to the comparatively smaller Prehistoric Park collection, I have the UK DVD release, as well as the 2 books released for it. Also, side note is that the DVD menu for Prehistoric Park is quite possibly the best DVD menu of all time. One book was a companion guide, and the other was more about the creatures, which also came with some trading cards. Prehistoric Park also came out with a board game, which is quite fun to play, and features some player pieces of Nigel, Bob, Suzanne and her assistant, as well as some of the creatures. I don't have the audio CD of the soundtrack, but I have it in digital, plus also getting unreleased tracks from the album from the Universal Production Music website from Daniel Pemberton's albums. The only custom item I have for Prehistoric Park is a park uniform shirt which I made on a website, and matches what's seen in the show pretty well. I'm quite proud of it. Also worth mentioning the Rod Arthur trading card from Doctor Who, which deserves to be in this collection. Before finishing with Primeval, here's some honourable other things that belong in this section. The BBC Lost World never came out with much aside from the DVD, though I do also have a postcard of the promo poster of it. The music also hasn't been officially released. Dragons of Fantasy Made Real is the honorary Walking With spin-off, like The Lost World, since it had some of the same creators as Walking With too. I have 3 DVD copies of this, the UK, US and Australian editions, all of which are subtly different. The American release is the shortened version of the documentary, whereas the other 2 have the full product. Dragons also included a book, which is a good little addition, and much to my upset there is no soundtrack release, aside from one single track. Oh, also there's this magnet. Finally, with my Primeval collection, I of course have the DVDs. One DVD for each series, plus Series 1 and 2 as well in steelbook form, which are from Asia, though the quality of them is no better than the UK releases, sadly. I also have the New World DVD, which for some reason is very hard to find. Primeval had a lot of other releases, including 4 official novels for the original show, set during Series 2 and 3, and one now for New World, which is the first new bit of Primeval content we've had in years, not to mention the new podcast hosted by Andrew Lee Potts. As well as the 5 new stories within the novels, all of which I have both physical copies and Kindle editions, there were also a few novelizations of the early episodes, split across 4 books, which I have too. Another form of book were the magazines and sticker collection, which I have a few bits and pieces of. I also managed to get a hold of the role-playing game, including the Series 4 and 5 top-up version as well as a few magazines, which have articles about the show from the time. The soundtrack I have is digital like all the others, with some partially unreleased stuff from Series 1, Episode 1 and 6. I managed to collect all of the character options figures during the heyday of the show when they were being sold in the toy shops around the UK, and over the years I've expanded to now have 6 Raptors, one of which is new in the box with Lester, 5 Future Predators, and 2 Smilodon. I also have a custom collector Smilodon painted to look like the one seen in the show by someone on eBay. Other toy-like things I own are the Flytech Rex, which I've never managed to get to work, the Anuognathus version still eludes me, and the plush of Rex, which used to make the sounds but now doesn't anymore. Another thing which could be counted as a sort of toy is the Anomaly Detector, and the Future Predator board game, which comes with a great mini Predator figure. I got a replica mini motorbike of the one Cutter and Steven used in Series 2 Episode 1, which is now part of my Raptor display too. I was lucky enough to go to Comic-Con in 2022 to see Jason Fleming, who signed some things, and I also saw Douglas Henschel in a theatre play called Mary. I've also had a Zoom call with Andrew Lee Potts with some friends to chat all things Primeval. And that's the extent of my collection for these fabulous shows. I hope you've enjoyed seeing it. I've been building it for years and it's taking up a large portion of my room, but what's new? Thanks for watching.
Nice one.